Hey, I've never seen silver shine so much. Take a look at this beautiful streakless satin silver metallic job on this beautiful Acura RSX full spray job, and we're going to show you exactly how we did it here on this episode of Paint Society. Hey, Brian here, and welcome back to this episode of Paint Society. If you're new to Paint Society, this is a channel for beginners all the way up to professionals. And today we're going to show you how we refinished this whole entire beautiful Acura RSX and brought it back to the day it rolled out of the assembly line. And some of you might remember this vehicle here on our channel before. Now, this vehicle has been painted in different areas of the vehicle, and after we finished our job, the owner really wanted to freshen up the whole entire vehicle and make it one complete color and one complete smoothness, and that is exactly what we did. Now, for this particular job, it wasn't too hard to prep. Most of the paint, honestly, was in great condition, and with some minor scratches and chips along the way, all we had to do is feather those in and get those all primed up. And once we got this thing all completely primered up, it was time to get it completely clean. I don't like to ever have a car come into the booth without first initially washing it down. So thankfully for us, we picked up a new tools from Giraffe Tool, which is a wall-mounted pressure washer that is completely retractable with over 100 feet of hose reel that you can retract it in and out. So we found a spot in the shop and we mounted it on the wall using the included mounting hardware. Once everything was drilled in and mounted to the wall, then it was time to put our pressure washer onto the backing plate and get to work. Now, I will say we want to use our pressure washer alongside with a quality degreaser, and that's exactly why we're using our super clean degreaser, because this is really going to cut down on any of the contaminants that are on the surface from when the surface was prepped, anything around the shop, anything like that that might still be on the surface. This is a good way to get it clean. Now, previous to doing this RSX, I gotta say I have been using this pressure washer quite often. As soon as we got it hooked up, I was cleaning different things in the shop and also using it for different jobs. I always like to clean off my jobs before they hit the booth, and then once they hit the booth and they get sprayed, you can see the difference really is in the clear and how clean it comes out. I've always talked to you about how clean a job needs to be before it enters the booth, and without having the cleanliness, well, it's just not there. Before you go to bed, you take a shower, right? Before you hit the sheets, you want to be clean. Before you hit the booth, you want to be clean as well, and that's exactly what we're doing with each one of these jobs. So a great addition to our tool set. We're still able to use our pressure washer anywhere in the shop, and we don't have the messy cords like I did with my old Ryobi. To get that thing all back into the area was just a big mess, and well, now I'm really happy with the retractable hose. So much so that later on I'll show you the hose winder that I ended up getting for the house. Really, really cool, and really want to show you guys the opportunity that you can get with these pressure washers to get your jobs clean. So this is a very, very, very clean paint job, and I'm going to show you the end result real quick here before we dive into showing you the process of how we got it to look this good. And I will tell you guys, this job really challenged me because, well, painting a whole car is different from just painting a few panels. So you guys that are painting full cars every day, I really learned a lot with this. Keeping a wet edge is a big deal, and we're going to dive into some of the struggles or some of the things I learned about keeping a wet edge from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. You're going to learn it here, so let's get started when this car came into the booth. Once the car is completely dry, then it's time for masking. Now, it took me a good hour and a half to get this all masked up, but let me tell you, taking your time masking it up will make a big difference. Now, I ended up going with the paper here. Sometimes when you have so much back masking, to pull the plastic over the paper is a big issue. So I went with a 36-inch white paper, and we're going to use a brand new tack cloth to go over the surface using our anti-static gun. Now, I don't always do this, but when doing a full paint job, there's a lot of contact with the surface, so it's always good to go ahead and get a good tacking before you start spraying. Now, we're going to use a color build sealer here. Now, some cars will fully prime, some we won't. This just had little chips along the way when doing the minor body work, but since it's a silver and there's scratches here and there's scratches there, well, they're scattered throughout the vehicle, I don't trust my primer and my prep enough to just put my base coat over that. In fact, you should never just do that when you're doing a full complete paint job, and it's especially silver. You're going to want to seal it, because if you don't seal it, some of those fine scratches, the metallics are just going to settle into those fine scratches, and you're going to see them out in the sun, and it's something you're not going to want to do. You might end up needing to repaint the whole entire panel or blend it, and we just don't want to do that. So we finished this vehicle in 400 grit, and you're only going to need to give it one coat of sealer. Now, this is, again, color build sealer. It can be mixed in many different colors. This also can be used as a primer depending on how it is sprayed, but it's not the only sealer that you can spray. There's many different sealers on the market, but this is part of our Sikkens setup. So after one coat, we can see we are just walking down the sides, and what I'm trying to do is find my rhythm for spraying this job, and it took me a while to find my rhythm. Where do I want to start? I can tell you that walking panels is not for me. Walking the side of the car is not for me. I struggle with that, but it is completely ideal when doing the silver metallic, which you're going to see in the future here. For sealer, you can get away with it. Clear, you can get away doing panel by panel, but when you do your base, you want to make sure it is completely walked out. Now here we're going to bake it or flash it for 20 minutes at 125. You want to make sure that that sealer is completely dry. Although sealer never really completely cures, you want to make sure it's dry enough and flashed off enough for the base coat. And we're going to show you a little trick here in a little bit after the first coat to make sure you have a nice and smooth job. But you can see the sealer is nice and flattened out. This is a good visual aid to show you, hey, it is now ready for its base coat. So I headed to Lowe's and I picked up this empty gallon can, and I always like to mix up a max amount of paint so I have the same color for when I'm doing the bumpers. Now I chose D3. This is the color that matches the inside of the jams. This car's been painted over a few times, and I want to make sure I matched it. Now the first toner came out to 666, so we're going to go ahead and change that over to 95 ounces instead, because I want this paint job to really come out good, and I don't need any superstitions getting in the way if something went wrong. So there we go. We have 633 for our first mix, and we're ready to mix it in our Sikkens system. This is a top-of-the-line solvent system. We're using our extra slow reducer, you'll see. Now, I don't know what it is about this job, but it emptied out every single one of my toners. We're at the end of a cycle here, so make sure that your toners are completely mixed when using solvent. You want to turn them for about 15 minutes before you even decide to pour it out. Some of the gallons were pre-mixed on a shaker, so we make sure that all of the metallics and everything is completely mixed up before you pour it or before you spray it. Now I am using the Motivated Painter's Wall-Com. This is a 1.3. This is the base coat gun. Probably one of the best base coat guns. Lightweight, easy to use, and once again we're using extra slow reducer. Extra slow reducer is needed. Extra slow reducer is a 98 and above temperature reducer. You need to use extra slow when doing silver. If you're not, you're going to get yourself into a situation where you're going to get dry spray and it's going to look gritty. Now, granted, if it's 75 and below, you can use slow, but we were pushing not too hot temperature, I would say 83 degrees. But since it's a full overall job, you want your metallics and everything to land smooth. And what that extra slow reducer does is it keeps things open. It prevents it from drying in the air before it hits the panel. Now these are things that you'll need to acquire and learn as you're going, but here I'm giving you the great information ahead of time, and there are mistakes that I've made along the way and I wish I would have known sooner. Now I talked to you earlier about walking the sides of the car. If you don't do this in a metallic paint job or a candy, you will possibly see streaks in your panel. So make sure the hose isn't in your way, because you can trip, and you can make sure that you don't have any issues when it comes to walking the sides. After your first coat of base coat, you're gonna notice it's not gonna look perfect, and I don't want you to make it look perfect on the first coat. I want you just to get the paint on there. You're gonna see some splotchinesses. This is not because of the application, this is because of a coverage. So you're still seeing the sealer shine through there a little bit. It's not fully covered in some areas. What I don't want you to do is get concerned with getting full coverage here, because we really want the material to dry in between coats when you're doing a big job like this. If we're piling on material in certain areas, it's not gonna dry evenly, it's not gonna look good. You want your metallic to look nice, clean, and smooth. Now we're using an Eagle Abrasives K800 with a hand pad. I want you to do this step after your first coat of base. You don't want to sand your sealer. Your base is going to show you these little nuggets or little boogers here and there. And all you're going to do is go over them lightly and then tack it. On the hood, I just did the whole entire hood because the hood will collect dust because it's a flat panel. And then we're going to give it a second coat just the same way, around 24 PSI on this particular paint gun. Now after that is done, then we're gonna drop it down. Now there's about 10 minutes in between these coats. I want you to drop it down about 2 to 3 PSI, and we're gonna do what we call a mist coat, a fog coat, an orientation coat. It is basically when we want the metallic to go on nice and even, so we drop the PSI so that the pressure is a little bit lower and gives a wetter droplet. Since we're going at 2 or 3 inches more of a distance, we want that droplet to land wet. Remember, if we're spraying at a greater distance, it's going to dry in the air because it's going to have more time to dry in the air. So by reducing the PSI just by a little bit, we're sending less air through the paint gun to dry the paint as it's coming out. So a wetter droplet from a little bit more of a distance will be an even pattern. Now, why wouldn't we do this to begin with? Well, we'd be there forever trying to get coverage. So your first and second coat, you want to get your coverage. On your third coat, if you have coverage, then you can drop it. You're not ever going to do a drop coat if you don't have coverage. You're only doing a drop coat if you have coverage, and it's not necessarily needed on solid colors. Only mainly your candies or your metallics or anything like that. So you see here, after the drop coat, the third coat, this thing is looking fantastically smooth. I'm loving the way it looks. It's ready for clear, but I'm gonna give it more time. I wanna really get all the solvents. Remember, I got sealer, I got 3 coats of base. Let's get everything out of the paint, into the air, and out of the paint booth. And then after a good 25 minutes, then I'm gonna start to see what rhythm really works for me. And this is one of my struggles when it comes to painting this car. How can I keep a wet edge? So I was experimenting with the sealer. I started with the sealer at the bottom and going up and over. And then I'm like, okay, let me try doing from the top down. I did that with the base coat. And then I'm like, okay, for the clear coat, let me start at the bottom and let's see if I can keep the wet edge. Since the wet edge doesn't matter as much on the first coat, because the second coat we can tie it together. But basically you want to keep a wet edge, and what that is the end of the fan pattern is wet. And you want to keep that wetness going up and over the car. Now the problem I had with the first coat of trying to do this is that I then opened it up to having a dry edge in 3 different areas. That would be the hood, the front of the hood, the roof, and towards the trunk. Now I had 3 dry edges to try to keep wet while moving up and over the car. So what I realized is that this really isn't working for me. What I did is I made a phone call previous to this, and I talked to one of my painter friends at our sister shop that paints a lot of full cars, and I asked, how do you do it? He says, Brian, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna paint the roof on one side, you're gonna bring the paint down to the quarter panel and top of the fender. Then you're gonna catch the edge, you're gonna go back on the roof, catch the edge on the top, bring that down to the passenger side quarter panel. Then you're gonna go back and you're gonna work it from the back of the car all the way towards the front. If you're working in a paint booth that moves air from one side to the other. And that's exactly what I ended up doing with this second coat. Now I waited about a good 15 minutes between the second coat, and I put 10% reducer extra slow into the second coat just to keep it open, and I hustled on this second coat. This is the second coat here. You can see I'm moving back and forth from the top, from the back. I'm doing panel by panel. Walking the whole panel for clear coat just does not work for me. I can keep a wetter edge doing it this way, and it really helped me out. Now, this looks beautiful, and I had that other toy I wanted to show you before the finish, and this is my retractable hose reel, and it's 130 feet long, and I gotta show you this. My son is helping me out with the install on a Sunday morning. Doesn't get any better than that, having a little family time and teaching the young ones what to do. So basically, we wanted to get a hose winder because I'm so sick of the old one cracking when you wind it up because there's so much tension. So I tried out this Giraffe Tools hose winder, and I got it installed at the house. And I promise you, I was able to take this hose winder and I could take it all the way over to the neighbor's house across the street. So after I cleaned up my area, I played around with the different nozzle variations, and then I was like, let me take this over to Levi's house, which is completely across the way, and I watered his grass a little bit. And then check this out. This wasn't even at full capacity when I walked back. We're probably maybe at 100 feet here. So this was a great added incentive to my home garage, where I can tell the wife now, hey, you don't have any sort of excuse to not clean the car, all right? It's right there for you. It's easy. Just surprise me one day and clean the car. So love that hose reel, and God, I was tired after this. Just, man, I mean, this really ate me alive. I started at 8 a.m. with the final prep, and at 6 p.m. here. It was the whole entire day. But guys, I took my time doing it, and look at the results that we have here. I am so shocked and so happy. In me and my career, to get a paint job like this still means a lot to me. There's times when paint jobs don't come out like you want, but this one came out really good. And I've got to say, I'm really happy with it. And a paint job doesn't really matter until the next day. So let's go ahead and check things out. And this is the very next day here. You can see we still have a beautiful shine. Now, you will lose gloss if you did not apply product properly or you're using a cheaper clear. This is a Sikkens PC clear. Now, I did add, like I mentioned to you, on a second coat of clear, I did add 10% reducer just to help it smooth out a little bit and keep it wet and keep it open, and that is exactly what it did. It's got a nice OEM texture, nice OEM peel to it. It's smooth, but you can still see that, hey, this kind of looks like a factory job, and that's exactly what we want. You never really need to cut down a whole vehicle because you are taking off material. Why would you want to take off material? Unless this is a show car and it's going to stay inside, you need that UV protection. So we'll go around and we'll take out like a little piece of dirt, which is right here. And there's probably about 4 or 5 pieces of dirt throughout the whole entire job. This came out incredible. Remember, I talked to you about the pressure washer system. This made a big deal, a big difference in my final job. So let's get it all unmasked and let's check it out. But hey guys, in between time, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm going to show you what she looks like outside. I know it's going to look beautiful. It looks good in here. Anything that usually looks good in here looks even better outside. These lights are killer. But guys, this is Brian from Paint Society reminding you, don't overthink it. It's just paint. I'll see you guys on the next episode.